I still remember the day I first drove into Willow Creek Estates, expecting a quiet suburban haven nestled amid rolling hills. The entrance was marked by a tasteful stone sign wrapped in climbing ivy. Welcome to Willow Creek Estates, where community thrives in harmony. The winding road leading into the neighborhood was lined with stately oak trees, their branches forming a leafy canopy overhead. It was a scenic drive, reminiscent of small-town postcards, and the crisp early spring air made everything feel fresh and hopeful. At the time, I was looking forward to settling into a calmer environment than the bustling downtown district where I worked. Little did I know how quickly my illusions of harmony would be shattered. I, Jonathan Parker, was newly appointed as the lead city engineer for the broader municipal region. My office oversaw infrastructure projects, roads, bridges, water lines, and storm drainage. Most folks in Willow Creek Estates didn't realize my position. They assumed I was just another professional who commuted to the city each day. I kept my official role quiet because I preferred to be treated like any other resident. But life had a way of challenging that anonymity. On move-in day, I was unpacking boxes when I encountered Brenda Farnston, though practically everyone, behind her back, called her Karen. She was a middle-aged woman with neatly styled blonde hair, wearing a crisp polo embroidered with the Willow Creek Estates HOA logo. She clutched a clipboard as though it were an extension of her arm. Eyes scanning my yard, she advanced with the determination of a school principal eyeing a tardy student. "Good afternoon. I'm Brenda Farnston, though around here, folks just call me Karen." She gave a tight smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm the treasurer of our homeowners association. I came to welcome you and ensure you've read the HOA guidelines thoroughly. We pride ourselves on maintaining a certain standard, after all." I managed a friendly nod. "I've skimmed them, still settling in. I'll do my best to follow any rules." Her gaze flicked to a small pile of moving supplies beside my garage. "We do have parameters about visible clutter, so please keep everything neat. Also, check page 12 for guidelines on landscaping, and so forth." Her tone dripped with condescension. I forced a polite smile. "Sure. Understood. Thanks." She gave another stiff nod, then left, continuing her round about the neighborhood in a little golf cart. I thought perhaps her overzealous approach was limited to lecturing people about trash bins or yard decor. Yet within weeks, I would discover that Karen's thirst for control extended far beyond superficial matters, leading to a disastrous confrontation with the city's stormwater infrastructure and eventually, with me. During my first few weeks in Willow Creek Estates, I noticed something peculiar while taking my evening jogs around the neighborhood. Certain storm drains that I'd observed earlier, those grated inlets along the curb, seemed to be missing. Initially, I dismissed it as a trick of memory. Perhaps I'd mistaken the exact spots. But as the days went by, I confirmed that, indeed, some storm drains had been removed or covered over. A typical suburban street might have curb inlets spaced at intervals to gather runoff during rain. Willow Creek's older design had them in front of certain lots, about one for every 2 or 3 houses. Yet on one street, Sycamore Lane, I found the curb unbroken where I was sure a drain had been. Another evening, I spotted fresh asphalt patchwork over what looked like the remains of a drainage grate. Curious, I chatted with a neighbor, Mark Henderson, who'd lived there 5 years. He admitted noticing that the drain near my driveway disappeared last week. Someone patched it up overnight. But he had no idea why. Another neighbor said he saw an unmarked work truck around midnight a few nights prior, apparently removing or sealing off the drains. No official city crews would do such work in the dead of night without bright lampied vehicles, permits, or some notice to residents. My professional instincts lit up. Storm drains existed for a reason: to channel water away from streets and yards. Removing them could lead to pooling and flooding, especially if a heavy storm hit. So I decided to investigate discreetly. If the city had authorized a plan to reroute drainage, I would have known about it from my department's official channels. But no such project had been discussed. The puzzle deepened. As I made quiet inquiries among neighbors, rumors surfaced that the HOA, particularly Karen, hated the unsightly storm drains. Some new landscaping guidelines had been circulated, emphasizing uniform grassy curbs and aesthetic uniformity. But it seemed unthinkable that anyone would literally remove vital infrastructure just to make the curb look smoother. Then again, from my short interactions with Karen, I could imagine her caring more about appearances than practical function. I decided to attend the next HOA meeting, scheduled for the following week. If the storm drains were indeed being removed under Karen's directive, I needed to understand her rationale. Perhaps it was a misunderstanding, or maybe they had some misguided plan to upgrade them. However, the quiet alarm in my mind told me there was more to it, something reckless that could endanger the entire subdivision when the next big storm arrived. The HOA meeting was held in a modest community room at the local clubhouse, a squat building near the entrance of Willow Creek Estates. On a Tuesday evening, about 24 residents showed up, mostly retirees and middle-aged couples. Karen and the other board members, Harold the president, Linda the secretary, and 2 directors, sat at a folding table at the front, an official-looking crest of the HOA pinned to the wall behind them. I found a seat in the back, trying to blend in, though I recognized a few neighbors who nodded or whispered greetings. The meeting started with routine matters, budget updates, a discussion on pool maintenance, talk of replanting flowers by the sign. Then Karen cleared her throat, flipping a page on her clipboard. We come to item 6 on the agenda, street beautification and drainage. I want to confirm that our curb beautification efforts are proceeding well. The unsightly metal grates, or storm drains, have been removed from key vantage points. We're installing uniform stone culvert covers soon, which will be more visually appealing. This will also discourage leaves and debris from clogging them. My stomach twisted. So it was confirmed. Karen was behind the removal. She was describing it as though it was a done deal. I raised my hand. Karen acknowledged me with a thin smile, as if anticipating a challenge. Yes, Mr. Parker? I stood. I'm new here, but from what I understand, storm drains are crucial for preventing street flooding. Has there been an engineering study to ensure that removing or covering them won't cause water buildup or damage? Karen blinked, as if the question itself was an annoyance. We have a landscaping consultant who suggested a more streamlined aesthetic. The existing drains were old, rusted, and unattractive. Our community is private, so we can choose how to handle drainage. I frowned. But do we have an actual plan for the water that used to run into those drains? I'm worried about the risk of flooding if we have a heavy rain. The city usually designs those drains for a reason. Are we in touch with city engineers or public works? Karen pursed her lips. We're not obligated to consult the city for improvements on private roads. This is an HOA matter. And let me clarify, we haven't removed drainage entirely. We're simply ensuring it's less obtrusive. Stone covers and partial closures keep the curb line more uniform. I promise we'll keep our community beautiful. She offered a brittle smile, scanning the crowd for support. Some residents looked uneasy, others seemed oblivious. One older gentleman raised a concern about water backups, but Karen brushed it off, repeating claims that aesthetic improvements were beneficial. Harold, the HOA president, seemed to half-heartedly back her, possibly cowed by her forceful personality. I sat, dismayed at how easily she dismissed the engineering reality. She was meddling with an essential infrastructure system, presumably using unapproved contractors working at odd hours. This wasn't just an eyesore issue. It was potentially catastrophic. My next steps were clear. I would investigate exactly how many drains they'd tampered with, and then figure out how to stop this madness before the next big storm. Over the following week, I walked and drove through Willow Creek Estates systematically, noting every storm drain's location. Or more precisely, every location where a drain used to be. The patchy asphalt or suspicious fresh concrete told the tale. On some streets, only half the original drains remained. On others, entire rows were gone, replaced with smooth curb. In a few spots, I saw partial replacements, an awkward slab of decorative stone covering an opening. The airflow and water capacity looked severely compromised. While I surveyed, neighbors occasionally stopped me with questions. Are you from the city? Do we have an issue with the sewers? I kept my official title vague, simply explaining I was investigating concerns about drainage. Many expressed relief that someone was paying attention. A few mentioned they'd already had minor water pooling after a light rain. Another resident described how her basement sump pump was running more often, worried that the street's altered drainage might be pushing water onto her lot. 2 days later, I tallied up the results. By my conservative estimate, Willow Creek Estates had lost or drastically altered nearly 60% of its original curb inlets. On some corners, drainage was severely limited, with water presumably forced to flow blocks away to find an intact inlet. This kind of haphazard alteration spelled trouble in heavier storms, leading to localized flooding or water infiltration into houses. It was a textbook scenario for an engineering nightmare. I contacted the city's Department of Stormwater Management. Though I was their boss, I tried to do it discreetly. One of the mid-level inspectors, Ebony, confirmed there were no official permits pulled for redoing or removing drains in Willow Creek Estates. "That's alarming," she said. "We rely on those drains for the city's overall stormwater plan. Even if it's a private road, the water eventually flows into municipal lines." We arranged for Ebony to do a formal inspection, but we needed probable cause or a direct invitation from the HOA or homeowners. On private property, the city couldn't just barge in. So Ebony prepared a request for site access. Meanwhile, I planned to confront Karen more directly, hoping to make her see reason before a legal or environmental meltdown forced the issue. If that failed, I'd have to escalate further. The last thing I wanted was a nasty political brawl, but it was shaping up to be unavoidable. During this tense interim, the weather forecast shifted. Meteorologists predicted a strong cold front within a week, bringing heavy rains across the region. A local channel even warned of potential downpours with flash flood advisories. My anxiety rose. If the drains were compromised, Willow Creek Estates could face significant street flooding or worse, water pouring into basements, damaging property, and spurring lawsuits. I tried once more to reason with Karen. Catching her one morning by the HOA office, I calmly explained the coming storm risk. "Miss Farnston, if we get a heavy rainfall, the sealed or removed drains won't handle the runoff. We could see major flooding. I urge you to restore them or at least reopen them temporarily." She gave me an exasperated glare. "Look, I've consulted our landscaping and, well, a local handyman who says everything is fine. We have enough drainage capacity left. The previous system was overbuilt. We pay for these roads. We can do as we please." "Your handyman is not a certified drainage engineer," I pointed out. "There's a reason the city invests in these structures. They protect homes from water damage. If your new covers fail, the neighborhood will suffer. The HOA could be liable." Karen's face twisted with annoyance. "Our community wants a uniform look. Those old metal drains were ugly, full of leaves, and always smelly. We're improving the environment for residents. Smelly or not, they serve a function," I insisted. "We can't just remove them because they look bad. The next storm could cause literal disaster." She rolled her eyes. "I'm done discussing this. If you're so worried, buy flood insurance." Then she turned and strode away, ignoring me. I stood there, anger simmering. She was willfully blind to the real danger, too fixated on aesthetics and her self-appointed power. So I reached out to Ebony at the city again, who said she was finalizing the request to do an on-site inspection. We decided that if the HOA blocked us from official entry, we'd escalate to the city attorney. If the storm arrived before we could intervene, I dreaded the potential chaos. Days passed, tensions rose. The local news predicted a major weather event, possibly dropping several inches of rain in a short window. Willow Creek Estates was abuzz with speculation. Some residents placed sandbags around basement windows or garage doors, recalling rumors of the missing drains. A few tried contacting the HOA with concerns. Karen responded with mass emails. "Dear residents, we have improved the drainage system to enhance curb appeal. There is no cause for alarm. Our experts confirm all is well. Yours truly, B. Farnston, Karen, HOA Treasurer." Despite the breezy tone, many neighbors felt uneasy. Some pinned hopes on me. Whispers circulated that I worked in city engineering. I told them to remain vigilant, keep valuables off basement floors, and report any water issues promptly. Ebony confirmed that her formal request for inspection had been delivered to the HOA board. She'd received no reply yet, which likely meant Karen was ignoring or stonewalling it. Finally, on a drizzly Thursday, Ebony and I drove to Willow Creek Estates in her city-marked vehicle, hoping we could at least gather enough data from the public right-of-way or get a homeowner's written permission to inspect near their property. We had a handful of sympathetic residents willing to let us onto their lots, even if the roads themselves were private. As we parked at the subdivision's edge, Karen appeared in her golf cart, blocking the entrance. "Turn around," she barked. "You have no authority to enter private roads. I won't let you cause trouble." Ebony calmly explained. We're from the city's Department of Stormwater. We have reason to believe crucial drainage infrastructure was removed without permits. We just want to confirm. Karen practically sneered. I speak for the HOA. We do not consent. Get out. Ebony tried to hand her an official letter, but Karen refused it. Your piece of paper means nothing. Private property rights trump city meddling. We retreated for the moment, but not before Ebony snapped photos from the car, capturing patched curbs and missing drain inlets. We've enough to escalate to the city attorney, Ebony muttered as we drove away. I nodded, though the gathering storm weighed on my mind. By the time legal measures forced compliance, it might be too late to prevent a flood. The weekend arrived with a menacing gray sky, thick clouds rolling in from the west. By Saturday night, the Weather Service issued a flash flood watch for our county, forecasting thunderstorms and heavy rain through Sunday morning. I felt an icy dread. Willow Creek Estates was on the brink. Sure enough, around midnight, the rain began, quickly intensifying. Lightning flashed, thunder rumbled. Gusts of wind rattled windows. Unable to sleep, I paced my living room, phone in hand, expecting calls from frantic neighbors if water started to rise. By 2 a.m., a torrential deluge hammered the roofs. My rain gauge showed over an inch in just half an hour. With many of the neighborhood's drains gone, it was only a matter of time. At 2:45 a.m., the calls began. First from Mark Henderson. Water was pooling at the intersection near his home, creeping up the curb. Then from a frantic mother on Sycamore Lane. Water lapped at her driveway, threatening her garage. Another neighbor said water was swirling in the street like a small river. I grabbed my raincoat and boots, stepping out into the deluge to see for myself. The sight was surreal. Normally, the storm drains would have carried away the runoff, but now, large swaths of the streets were underwater. At the end of one cul-de-sac, a minivan was half submerged, water reaching the doors. The family inside tried to salvage items from the trunk, wading knee-deep. I rushed to help them move the vehicle to higher ground, the water surging around my legs. Lightning illuminated the swirling water near the patched curbs. Where inlets once stood, the curb was sealed, forcing water to accumulate. Some homes on the lower side of the subdivision had water breaching their lawns, creeping toward front doors. In a particularly low-lying corner, a small lake formed, submerging mailboxes up to their compartments. Amid the chaos, I spotted Karen. She stood on her porch, arms wrapped around herself, looking aghast at the flood. Even from a distance, I could see raw panic on her face. Her own street was partly submerged, though her house sat slightly higher. She made no move to help neighbors who were frantically bailing water or dragging furniture upstairs. Emergency vehicles eventually arrived, sirens piercing the stormy darkness. Firefighters and volunteer rescuers began evacuating a few families from flooded basements. City officials, alerted by Ebony, scrambled to set up temporary pumps. But it was an uphill battle. The damage was done. By sunrise, the rain subsided, leaving behind battered lawns, waterlogged vehicles, and a half-dozen houses with water infiltration. Neighbors surveyed the wreckage in stunned disbelief. And all around us were the silent, sealed curbs, like tombstones marking the place where functioning drains had been. As the sky cleared that Sunday morning, I joined Ebony and a small city crew who'd come to assess the damage. We waded through puddles, stepping around debris. Broken branches, sodden mulch, and muddy water stained the once pristine streets of Willow Creek Estates. Many residents were out, some with wet vacs or pumps, others forming bucket brigades to remove water from garages. The atmosphere was tense, a mix of relief that the storm had passed and outrage at how severe the flooding had been. We documented the worst-hit spots. Several homes on Elm Ridge Court had 6 to 8 inches of water in their basements. A few vehicles on the lower end of Sycamore Lane were ruined, water up to their dashboards. Lawn ornaments and trash bins had floated away, ending up scattered blocks from their origin. The city crew used portable pumps to clear standing water from certain intersections. Ebony shook her head in dismay. All this could have been mitigated if the storm drains were intact. They're basically forcing water to back up. Then, Karen emerged from her house, face drawn and eyes puffy. She marched toward Ebony, ignoring the rest of us. What are you doing here? This is private property. Ebony bristled. Under emergency management protocols, We have authority to assist with flood control in a crisis. You illegally removed city-linked drainage. Now people's homes are damaged." Karen looked outraged, but also fearful. "Those drains were our property. We pay for these roads. We had every right to reconfigure them." I stepped forward. "You closed them off without an engineering plan or city permit. Now look around. Families are dealing with flooded homes and thousands in damage. This was entirely preventable." Her expression flickered with a mix of guilt and defiance. I was just trying to improve curb appeal." None of my board members objected. "I never anticipated it would flood like this." Ebony pulled out a printed document. "Miss Farnston, here's an official cease and desist from the city attorney. You must restore the storm drains immediately, or the city will do so and bill the HOA for all costs. Potential legal action is also pending, given the damage caused." Karen's hands trembled as she took the paper. She tried to protest, but Ebony cut her off. "We'll be back with the city attorney. This is serious." Neighbors overheard the exchange. Some confronted Karen right then and there, shouting about her negligence, threatening lawsuits. She retreated into her home, slamming the door on the outcry. The wave of anger cresting around her property seemed unstoppable. I suspected that the real consequences, civil lawsuits, code violations, or even criminal charges, had yet to fully manifest. Word spread quickly about the city's intervention and the cease and desist order. Many neighbors, incensed at Karen's irresponsible actions, demanded an immediate HOA meeting. The board scheduled an emergency session for Monday evening at the community clubhouse. Tensions ran high, with some residents threatening to call their own lawyers if the HOA refused to rectify the drains. Meanwhile, I took calls from the local media. The fiasco had gained attention after multiple rescue vehicles were seen in Willow Creek Estates. A local TV reporter, Bonnie Nguyen, arrived to interview distressed families. She also approached me, given rumors that I was a city engineer. I carefully stated that while the city was assisting with flood management, the matter of removed drains was under investigation. My priority was helping neighbors recover. "Is it true the HOA treasurer authorized removal of city infrastructure?" asked Bonnie, microphone in hand. I clarified, "These roads are private, but the drainage system ties into city lines. So, removing them has broad implications. The full extent of the damage is being assessed." Karen was notably absent from public view, presumably holed up inside her house. Some neighbors whispered that she might skip the emergency meeting, though as treasurer, she was a central figure in any discussion about repairing or reinstating the drains. People wanted answers, especially those whose properties had been damaged. Insurance companies might disclaim coverage if the flooding was caused by the HOA's negligent modifications. On Monday evening, I arrived early at the clubhouse, greeting folks who were still drying out from the flood. They approached me with gratitude, describing how Ebony's city team had helped pump out water. A sense of solidarity had emerged among residents, uniting them against the person who caused this crisis, Karen. The question remained, would the HOA board stand up to her and do the right thing? Or would she continue to manipulate them with fear or misinformation? The community hall was packed shoulder to shoulder that Monday night. Many residents who rarely attended meetings came now, drawn by anger or desperation. Some wore damp clothes, having spent the day cleaning up water damage. Others clutched notes or documents, presumably to share costs incurred by the flooding. At the front table sat the HOA board, Harold the president, Linda the secretary, 2 other directors, and an empty chair for the treasurer. Karen was notably late, which only fueled the crowd's impatience. Harold cleared his throat. "We've called this emergency session to address the flood event and the city's cease and desist order. We know many of you have suffered property damage." A flurry of shouted questions erupted. Who let her remove the drains? Where's Karen? Is the HOA paying for the damage? Harold held up his hands for calm. We ask everyone to speak in turn. Just then, Karen appeared, slipping in through a side door. She wore a strained expression, her eyes flitting across the sea of resentful faces. She took her seat stiffly. Harold tried to proceed with the agenda. One homeowner, Miss Patterson, recounted how her basement took on 3 feet of water. Her voice shook with fury. "I want to know, who authorized sealing those drains? We had no vote, no discussion." Harold looked at Karen, who exhaled sharply. "As treasurer, I oversaw budget allocations for curb beautification. The entire board was aware of the project. Linda, the secretary, spoke up, voice quivering. We never voted to remove them all, Karen. You said you were just replacing a few old ones with decorative covers. We had no idea so many were sealed or taken out. Karen bristled. It was necessary to maintain uniform aesthetics. The consultant we hired recommended partial closures so water wouldn't carry debris. I never intended it to cause floods. Another resident stood, eyes flashing. Your consultant was some unlicensed handyman, right? We've seen him around at night, patching the curbs. You never sought professional engineering advice. Karen sputtered. I believed it was a straightforward project. I was told the old drains were mostly unnecessary. This isn't my fault. The tension in the room crackled. People shouted about negligence, pointing out how city staff had been barred from inspecting. Linda read aloud the city's cease and desist letter, which threatened legal action if the drains weren't restored. Then Harold turned to Karen solemnly. We must comply. The board can't stand behind a reckless decision that's harming residents. We have to fix the drains, immediately. Karen's face turned ashen. But that'll cost thousands, maybe tens of thousands. Our reserves will be depleted. We might have to raise HOA fees. People will blame me. A cacophony of angry retorts followed. Yes, we do blame you. Take responsibility for once. You've cost us more in flood damage anyway. Visibly shaking, Karen attempted to salvage control. We'll need a special assessment. Or maybe we can wait until. But the crowd cut her off, demanding immediate restoration. Linda motioned for a vote to remove the lumps, open the drains, and hire professional contractors. The motion passed overwhelmingly, though Karen abstained. Residents shouted for Karen's resignation. She refused. Harold concluded the meeting with a promise. We'll begin emergency work tomorrow, in partnership with the city if needed. We apologize for the hardship caused. A wave of relief washed through the hall, though the question of paying for repairs and the potential lawsuits still loomed. Karen slipped out amid catcalls and jeers, her authority in shambles. I watched her retreat, suspecting that her troubles were just beginning. The city attorney, insurance companies, and the outraged homeowners weren't done with her by a long shot. True to Harold's pledge, the HOA board began the process of reversing the drain closures. They hired a legitimate civil engineering firm recommended by Ebony, who immediately started drafting plans to restore or reinstall the original curb inlets. Under the city's watchful eye, crews tore up fresh asphalt and decorative covers to reopen the pipes. It was messy, time-consuming, and expensive. One contractor estimated the cost might approach $250,000 to fully restore the system. The board was forced to consider a steep special assessment to fund the fix. Meanwhile, homeowners hammered Karen with demands for compensation for water damage. Many filed insurance claims, but some insurers balked, citing negligence by the HOA. Potentially, the entire association might be on the hook for thousands in claims. Several residents threatened individual lawsuits against Karen, citing her personal role in removing essential drains without board approval. The mother of one teenage boy who got sick from mold exposure after the flood drafted a strongly worded legal notice. Another neighbor hired an attorney to recoup costs of a destroyed heating system. Karen responded by sending a frantic letter to the board, blaming them for failing to stop me and claiming she acted under the assumption of full board support. She offered no apology, only excuses about misunderstood instructions. Privately, Harold and Linda told me they planned to remove her from the treasurer's seat, either by a board vote or a membership recall. The damage to her reputation was beyond repair. Amid the mounting chaos, city officials advanced their own investigation. Ebony's department found that the so-called beautification project had compromised the city's broader stormwater infrastructure. The city attorney hinted at possible charges. Tampering with municipal drainage lines could be considered a violation of building codes or even a public safety offense. There was also talk of filing an injunction or seeking criminal charges if Karen's actions were proven willfully negligent. My quiet role in all this was recognized but overshadowed by the wave of official measures. Karen, for her part, retreated from public view. Some neighbors spotted her packing belongings into her SUV, possibly staying elsewhere to avoid confrontation. The question was whether she would face actual jail time or merely a financial ruin. The flood had triggered so much damage that the courts would want accountability. And with each day, more evidence surfaced of her heavy-handed approach and disregard for professional advice. A week later, the HOA board convened another special meeting to formalize the special assessment and vote on Karen's position. This time, the atmosphere was somber yet resolute. Residents arrived with boxes of receipts, photographs, and damage claims. The new civil engineers displayed diagrams of the restoration plan, explaining how many drains had to be reconstructed from scratch. Karen showed up, flanked by a harried-looking attorney who whispered in her ear. She kept her head high, but her usual haughty demeanor was gone. Tension thickened in the air as Harold opened the session. "Thank you all for coming," he began quietly. "As you can see, we have a serious financial challenge. The estimated cost to restore the drains is around $250,000. Our reserve funds cover only a fraction, meaning a special assessment is unavoidable." Groans rippled through the crowd. One father demanded, "So we all pay for Karen's mistake? This is insane." Another neighbor argued that Karen herself should bear the cost. The board's attorney explained that while Karen might be held personally liable in civil court, the immediate repairs must come from HOA funds to prevent further damage. Linda stood to read a petition that had circulated among homeowners, calling for Karen's removal from the treasurer role and from the board. Over 75% of residents had signed. Applause broke out. Karen's attorney tried to object, but Linda pressed on, concluding, "Based on the overwhelming demand, the board will vote now." The board vote was swift and unanimous, Karen abstaining, of course. Harold turned to her. "Effective immediately, Miss Farnston, you're removed from the treasurer position and from the board entirely." A moment of stunned silence gave way to cheers and claps. Karen's cheeks flushed. She rose, trembling with anger, accusing them of scapegoating. But the crowd's fury was unyielding. Shouts of "You caused this," and "We want justice," battered her. Her attorney guided her out before more confrontation erupted. I stood quietly among the residents, relieved that the neighborhood had taken a firm stand. Next would come the question of legal consequences. Removing her from office was just the first step. The damage to property and finances might take years to fix, but at least the path to recovery was clear. With Karen no longer in charge, we could rebuild the drainage system properly, ensuring no further flooding. Her personal fate, however, was sealed in the hands of the courts. Over the following weeks, a wave of lawsuits formally hit Karen and, to a lesser extent, the HOA. Each day, it seemed, a new neighbor announced they were seeking damages for ruined furniture, mold remediation, or structural repairs from the flooding. A few combined efforts under one law firm, building a class action against both Karen personally and the association. The city also prepared to file separate charges, some civil, possibly criminal, regarding unpermitted infrastructure tampering. Karen tried to deflect blame, claiming she had verbal approval from the board. But Linda's meeting minutes proved Karen had only ever described it as minor aesthetic improvements to older drains. She had never disclosed the extent of the closures. The damning evidence that she hired an unlicensed contractor to do late-night removals sealed the argument. Emails recovered from her personal account, telling the contractor to just seal them all, left little doubt she acted beyond any plausible misunderstanding. Harold and Linda coordinated with the new civil engineers to expedite repairs. Streets that had previously flooded were prioritized. Large trucks arrived daily, ripping out the patchy asphalt, reinstalling new metal grates or custom inlets that complied with city code. Ebony oversaw inspections, ensuring they followed official guidelines. Despite the noise and inconvenience, residents welcomed the progress, eager to restore normalcy. Meanwhile, Karen's presence faded. Rumor was that she'd moved to a relative's place outside the neighborhood, avoiding the hostile stares of neighbors. Some said her house was on the market, though no sign had been posted yet. Possibly she feared stepping foot on the very streets she'd flooded. The once domineering figure was now persona non grata, a pariah. In a small but telling sign, the flowers around her yard wilted from neglect, overshadowed by a withering pile of junk mail stuffed in her mailbox. People who once dreaded her visits in a golf cart now spoke of her with anger or pity. For me, it was a cautionary example. How an overzealous HOA officer, blinded by vanity, could wreak havoc on essential infrastructure. This was precisely the kind of fiasco we taught about in engineering ethics courses, though I never imagined living through it firsthand. The city attorney filed official charges after concluding their investigation. First, there were civil infractions, unpermitted alteration of municipal drainage lines, violation of local building codes, and obstruction of official city inspections. The city demanded restitution for the emergency flood response, citing the extra personnel and equipment used to pump water from the streets. Worse for Karen, there was talk of criminal negligence. The argument: she knowingly removed or sealed crucial infrastructure, ignoring warnings, which led to property damage and endangered residents. If found guilty, Karen could face hefty fines or even jail time. The district attorney weighed the evidence carefully, culminating in an indictment on charges of reckless endangerment of public safety. Karen's attorney tried to negotiate a plea deal, claiming she never intended harm, just lacked expertise. But the volume of complaints, the real injuries, and the brazen disregard for city codes were hard to dismiss. Ignorance is no excuse, Ebony told me. If you dismantle a public safety structure for vanity, that's on you. Local media covered the story extensively. Headlines like HOA Karen destroys storm drains, sparks massive flood circulated on social media. News vans occasionally parked at the subdivision's entrance, hoping to snag interviews. Herald gave a measured statement. We are cooperating fully with the city, restoring the drains, and deeply regret any inconvenience to residents. By contrast, Karen's attorney refused comment, fueling speculation that her defense was shaky. Some neighbors spotted the attorney departing Karen's house with stacks of documents. The civil suits from homeowners kept piling on. Meanwhile, the city's repair efforts in Willow Creek Estates progressed, with the cost shared by the HOA's special assessment and potential damages from Karen if the lawsuit succeeded. The entire fiasco was expensive, humiliating, and draining, literally and figuratively, for everyone involved. Eventually, the criminal case moved forward. Karen appeared in court for a preliminary hearing. A crowd of Willow Creek residents filled the gallery, eager to see justice. I attended quietly, wanting to understand how the process would unfold. Ebony testified about her attempts to inspect the roads, how Karen had blocked city crews. The prosecution played pictures of the removed drains, accompanied by footage of flooded streets. They even introduced emails from Karen instructing the contractor. Those drains are an eyesore. Seal them up, cover them if needed, so we have a uniform curb line. Karen's defense attorney argued that she was misguided but well-intentioned, contending that the board never objected to her plan. But the judge seemed unimpressed, especially after hearing testimony from homeowners describing the night of the flood. One father recalled carrying his daughter through waist-high water on a street that had no operational drains. In a dramatic moment, the mother of a disabled resident described how the lack of drainage nearly trapped her son in a flooded bedroom. She glared at Karen in tears, calling her callous and vain. The testimony underscored how personal and traumatic the ordeal had been. Karen, looking pale, took the stand briefly. She stammered about beautification and lack of clarity, but the prosecution hammered her with pointed questions. Why not consult a qualified engineer? Why remove drains at night? Why ignore city attempts to inspect? She had no coherent rebuttal, only laments that no one told me it would cause such issues. The judge concluded there was enough evidence to proceed to trial. Bailing her out required a hefty sum. Outside the courthouse, Karen rushed to a waiting car, ignoring reporters who shouted questions. Her attorney faced a throng of cameras, giving a curt no comment. For Willow Creek Estates, this signaled that accountability was finally on the horizon. Many believed Karen would ultimately plead to avoid a lengthy trial. The question was whether prison time or heavy fines awaited her. The fiasco was close to ending, though it left the entire neighborhood battered. As Karen's legal troubles escalated, the reconstruction of Willow Creek's storm drains neared completion. After weeks of noisy construction, the civil engineers replaced nearly all the missing or sealed inlets. Shiny new grates lined the curbs at appropriate intervals, carefully angled to channel water properly. Ebony's team verified each repair, ensuring the system tied seamlessly into the city's main lines. The final cost exceeded $300,000, financed by a combination of HOA reserves, special assessments, and partial homeowner contributions. The association also anticipated settlement money from Karen if the courts forced her to pay. Despite the headaches, residents found relief in the knowledge they were safer from another deluge. The fear that any rainy night might flood their streets diminished. Some neighbors joked, "We appreciate our ugly storm drains now, better ugly than drowned." Meanwhile, the new board, minus Karen, tried to promote unity. They organized a community barbecue to celebrate the project's completion. Families came out, sharing stories of how they coped during the flood. Even Ebony attended as a guest of honor, receiving thanks for her swift action. I felt some pride too, seeing how the neighborhood overcame this crisis. Yet I never gloried in Karen's downfall. I simply believed accountability was essential. At that barbecue, I overheard residents discussing potential civil suits, with some urging patience for the legal process. Others worried that Karen might vanish or declare bankruptcy, leaving them high and dry. The collective sentiment, however, was that justice would be done, especially with the city pressing charges. For the first time in months, Willow Creek Estates exhaled a cautious sigh of hope. A few weeks later, the trial for Karen's criminal negligence began. Media coverage was significant, featuring local headlines like "Storm Drain Scandal Goes to Court." Curious onlookers packed the courthouse. I attended as a silent observer, hoping the outcome would affirm the importance of following proper engineering practices. The prosecution laid out a clear narrative. Karen removed vital drainage with no permit or professional input, ignoring repeated warnings. They called Ebony, Harold, Linda, and even some residents as witnesses. Each recounted how Karen's unilateral decisions led directly to the dangerous flooding. Photos and videos from that stormy night were projected in court, showing water swirling waist-high in the streets. Karen's defense tried to frame her as a scapegoat, claiming the board bore equal blame. They argued the storm was unusually severe and that the old drains might have failed anyway. But the city's official data showed the rainfall, though heavy, was well within design specs for properly maintained drains. The piece de resistance was an engineering analysis revealing that the removed inlets had drastically reduced the system's capacity, guaranteeing flooding under such conditions. When Karen took the stand, she seemed deflated, no longer the arrogant figure from months prior. She insisted she meant no harm, repeating she had no idea it would be so bad. The prosecutor pointed out her consistent refusal to allow city inspection. "Isn't it true you knew professional oversight would expose your removal of these drains, Miss Farnston?" Her stammered denials rang hollow. After days of testimony, the jury deliberated for only a short time. They returned a guilty verdict on multiple counts, including reckless endangerment and tampering with essential infrastructure. The tension in the courtroom broke with gasps and murmurs. Karen bowed her head as the judge read the decision, scheduling a sentencing hearing for 2 weeks later. Meanwhile, her attorney quietly asked for leniency. Outside, the prosecution team expressed satisfaction that the case reaffirmed the principle. Ignoring engineering standards can have dire consequences. Ebony told me with relief, "It's a tragedy people had to suffer, but at least the system responded. No one is above basic safety codes." 2 weeks later, Karen appeared again in court for sentencing, looking even more frail. Her attorney pleaded for probation, citing her lack of a prior criminal record. But the judge emphasized how many families were harmed financially and emotionally, and how Karen repeatedly dismissed the city's attempts to prevent catastrophe. The judge's words were stern. "Miss Farnston, you chose to disregard professional advice and tamper with crucial infrastructure, causing not just monetary loss, but genuine danger to your neighbors. This court cannot overlook your willful negligence." He sentenced Karen to 1 year in county jail, followed by 3 years of probation. Additionally, he imposed heavy fines and restitution obligations. She was personally ordered to pay a portion of the drain restoration costs and damages to certain homeowners, though it was unclear if she had the assets to fulfill it. The judge concluded, "Let this serve as a lesson that vanity or personal preference can never trump public safety." A hush fell over the courtroom. Some Willow Creek residents wept in relief, others nodded grimly. Karen stood in shock as the bailiff led her away in handcuffs. In that moment, the final chapter of her reign as self-appointed aesthetic dictator ended. She was no longer the feared HOA enforcer, just another convict facing the consequences of her hubris. Outside, local news cameras captured the scene, broadcasting the outcome to the region. Headlines rang out. HOA Karen jailed for storm drain scandal. The story of how an obsession with beautification led to flooding injuries and property damage resonated widely, sparking debate about HOA powers and the critical need for professional oversight in infrastructure changes. With Karen behind bars, Willow Creek Estates found a new sense of unity. The board, restructured under Harold's more balanced leadership, focused on healing rifts and rebuilding trust. They engaged regularly with city engineers, including me, quietly in the background, to ensure that all community projects met proper standards. The fiasco had taught everyone a valuable lesson about the dangers of ignoring qualified expertise. Homeowners gradually settled insurance claims and lawsuits. The association's insurance kicked in for some group settlements, though it meant premiums rose. The special assessment remained, but many residents were content to pay, knowing it secured their property against future floods. By the time autumn arrived, the streets boasted fully operational, well-maintained drains. Even in heavy rains, water flowed gracefully off the curbs, no longer threatening the homes. The entire area wore a renewed sense of safety. Karen's house, once pristine, went into foreclosure. Rumor was the bank took it after she failed to meet mortgage and legal obligations. People barely recalled her landscaping demands or dreaded visits. The new owners who eventually moved in found the neighborhood welcoming, less paranoid about paint colors or yard ornaments, and more focused on genuine community spirit. For me, personally, life continued. My role as lead city engineer meant I oversaw many projects beyond Willow Creek. But I kept a soft spot for the folks here, forging friendships with neighbors who once viewed me only as the new guy. I remained discreet about my full influence unless needed. Ebony and I continued to collaborate on other city issues, often referencing the Willow Creek fiasco as a cautionary example when dealing with private developments. One bright spring morning, nearly a year after the infamous flood, I walked the streets of Willow Creek Estates, marveling at the transformation. Lush lawns, blooming flowers, kids riding bikes, and most notably, shining metal drains properly spaced along the curbs. A gentle breeze carried the scent of fresh-cut grass, untainted by the fear of water rising. Neighbors who spotted me waved, some coming over to chat about normal suburban concerns, pet cleanup, local yard sales, or the upcoming block party. The memory of that catastrophic storm lingered, but it served as a reminder that even a serene community could be threatened by a single misguided official. The difference now was that people valued transparency, accountability, and expertise. The board had improved communications, sending monthly newsletters with updates on any proposed changes, always referencing professional guidelines. As for Karen, she remained in prison for her sentence, likely with her property confiscated or sold to pay restitution. Most folks rarely mentioned her name, but if it ever came up, it was with a mix of anger for the damage she caused and relief that she could no longer harm others. The entire fiasco had, ironically, brought Willow Creek Estates closer together. People no longer took infrastructure for granted, nor placed blind trust in a single individual's whims. When I arrived back at my driveway, I paused to admire the curb inlet in front of my house, water trickling down from the previous night's drizzle. A year ago, Karen might have labeled it an eyesore. But to me, and to everyone who endured that flood, it was a symbol of safety, necessity, and the triumph of common sense over reckless vanity.